Hello, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Football. My name is John Halpin, not alongside Chris Palmer today. He is on a very much-needed vacation, but don't worry. I am here with you to give you all that great football content. So, with that being said, let's move on to our Week 3 recap, starting with the Thursday night game, the Pittsburgh Steelers falling to the Cleveland Browns 29-17. This was an ugly loss for the Steelers because their offense just could not get it going, and it was a rough one to watch. Nick Chubb and the Cleveland Browns. Nick Chubb leads the league in rushing yards so far, so keep an eye out for that. But man, this is going to get a very heated in the AFC North. So let's move on to the other team in the AFC North, other than my Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, defeating the New York Jets 27-12. The Bengals look to get back to shape, and the Jets fall as they normally do. So, with that being said, the Bengals have a tough matchup ahead, playing against the Miami Dolphins this upcoming Thursday on Week 4. So, let's get to my Baltimore Ravens beating the New England Patriots 37-26. Woo, this was a great game to watch. Lamar looks like an MVP caliber form, and it was absolutely Lamarvelous. So, before I move on, I do want to say Mac Jones was injured on the last offensive snap for the New England Patriots. He suffered a high ankle sprain and looks to be out for at least 4 weeks. So in that time, New England's going to be turning to either Brian Hoyer or Bailey Zappi. So let's move to the NFC, where the Philadelphia Eagles moved to 3-0, defeating the Washington Commanders 24-8. And the Eagles look like the team to beat in the NFC. And it's no wonder, because Jalen Hurts is an absolute baller. Let's stick to the NFC with the New Orleans Saints beating the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers beating the Saints, 22-14. The Saints wish they would have won, because this would have brought them to 2-1. But no, the Panthers get their first win of the season, and it's against a divisional rival. Baker Mayfield is pretty happy. So let's move on to Chicago Bears defeating the Houston Texans 23-20. Shout out to Roquan Smith getting 16 tackles and 1 interception. It was an impressive outing for the Bears. Low scoring effort, but hey, a win is a win. So let's move on to one of the 2 upsets of the week. The Indianapolis Colts upsetting the Kansas City Chiefs 20-17. Woo! What happened, you might say? Well, Travis Kelce dropped a game-winning touchdown, and there was multiple special teams blunders on behalf of the Chiefs, and the Colts just kept hanging in there, and ultimately prevailed, getting their first win of the season. Congrats, Colts. So let's move on to probably the second upset of the week. The Miami Dolphins beating the Buffalo Bills. Oh, man. The Bills, the unstoppable juggernauts, stopped in Miami against Tua. And, man, this was a great game to watch if you were able to watch it. But so many just little mistakes on behalf of the Bills. They just couldn't kick a field goal. They couldn't spike the ball in time. Hell, the Dolphins even committed a butt punt. Yes, a butt punt. The punter punted the ball into the butt of another Dolphin. And that will not live in infamy, because the Dolphins won this game. The Dolphins go on to play the Cincinnati Bengals on Thursday night, as I mentioned previously, and the Buffalo Bills will be playing my Baltimore Ravens next week on Week 4. So let's move to the NFC, where the Minnesota Vikings beat the Detroit Lions 28-24. Woo, like the Lions had the lead, but the Vikings made the comeback. And you like to see it for the Vikings because, hell, it gets them to 2-1 in that division. But, man, the Detroit Lions, they're scrappy, but they just could not close out this game. That's a tough loss for them. So let's move on to probably another tough loss for the Las Vegas Raiders, losing to the Tennessee Titans 24-22. Now, King Henry, he looks back in form, doesn't he? Came just running all over the field, all over the Raiders, and the Raiders just could not seal the deal at the end to tie it up. And the Tennessee Titans get their first win of the season, and the Raiders are the only winless team left in the league. Oh, man, that's a tough pill to swallow for all those Raiders fans out there. So let's move on from the Raiders to the Jacksonville Jaguars getting it done over the Los Angeles Chargers, 38-10. Now, the Chargers were dealing with a lot of injuries, but, man, the Jags pulled it through, and, you like to see it happen because Jacksonville, they are fighters. They are absolute fighters, and you like to see it. I know I like to see it. So keep an eye on the Jags this season because they are no longer an easy win. So let's move on to the Fox NFL game of the week. The Green Bay Packers coming into Tampa to play Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And the Green Bay Packers came out with a win, 14-12. It was a close, low-scoring affair. Tom Brady with a last-ditch drive to come down and score a touchdown, but could not convert the 2-point conversion and ultimately fell to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, bringing both teams to 2-1. So let's stick to the NFC, where the Los Angeles Chargers beat the Arizona Cardinals 20-12. Cardinals have a tough time scoring in the first half, but the Rams held on and made sure Kyler Murray didn't pull off any magic like he did last week against the Raiders. This was a very tough game, a hard-hitting game, but an important game because it was a divisional game. So let's move on to, still in the NFC, with the Atlanta Falcons coming away with a win over the Seattle Seahawks, 27-3. The Seahawks, they're okay, but I got to give it to the Falcons. They are fighters. They are definitely fighting this year, putting up a lot of points every game. And they're going to be a tough outing for whoever has to play them. So let's move on to the Sunday night primetime game, which was a very weird game with the Denver Broncos and the San Francisco 49ers, with the Broncos coming away with the win 11-10. Jimmy Garoppolo stepped out of the end zone for the 49ers, and it's just one of those games where you're just like, what was happening? Nothing was going right, and honestly, this was all about the punters. The punters were just on field and just punting them away. And both teams, they have a lot of questions to answer these upcoming weeks, but their schedule does not get any easier from here on out. So let's move on to the last game of Week 3 with the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. The New York Giants were riding high 2-0 into this game, but yet couldn't pull off the win. The Dallas Cowboys win 23-16. And man, that defense for Dallas, they had 5 sacks against the New York Giants. That is a tough loss for the Giants. But hey, it's just another game. You got to shake off and just move on to the next week. So, with that being said, that was our NFL Week 3 recap. Now, that was a great week of football, and I want to move on to making our picks for Week 4. Now, I know what you're saying. John, don't you and Palma talk about some games? At least 5 games you guys talk about in going into this upcoming week. Well, we do, and we will return to that once Chris Palma returns. But I want to do it a little differently this time around. I'm going to discuss a little bit about each game, and I'm going to give both Palma's pick and my pick for this upcoming Week 4. So, you ready? Because I am. So let's start with the Miami Dolphins going to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. Now, this game is going to be the first game the Bengals unveil their white stripes. So we're going to see some very flashy jerseys on the field come Thursday night. But I got to say, the Dolphins, say what you will about the Dolphins, they look impressive. They look really good to form. They just find a way to win games. And Tua, this is his breakout year. Now, the Bengals, they had a very easy win last week against the Jets, coming back to form, but yet it wasn't as easy as they wanted it to be. Jamar Chase just had a hard time against Ahmad Sauce Gardner. Sauce, as they say. But, oh man, this is a very tough matchup. If the Dolphins win this, they have a lot of easy wins ahead of them, such as the Jets and I think the Texans and stuff like that. So they have very winnable games coming up ahead. The hard part of their schedule was these first couple games with the Patriots, the Ravens, the Bills, and now the Bengals. And if Miami could beat the Bengals, they are going to be the team to beat in the AFC. But Chris Palmer is going to be taking the Dolphins, but I am going to hold off one more week. I'm going to take the Bengals to win this game on Thursday night. I don't know. It's going to be a tough matchup. It might be a high-scoring matchup, but we shall see on Thursday night. So let's move on to Sunday's games, starting with my Baltimore Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills. Now, full disclaimer, the Bills, they're hurt. Their two safeties are hurt. They have two offensive linemen hurt. Stephon Diggs is questionable. It's going to be a very tough outing for the Bills and as well as the Ravens. But Lamar looks like an MVP caliber year. He is unstoppable. Through the air, on the ground, it doesn't matter. He just gets it done. Baltimore, pay this man because he's going to bring home the Lombardi, hopefully. One can only dream. So, with that being said, Palmer is going to be taking the Buffalo Bills, and I'm going to be taking my Baltimore Ravens on this Sunday night matchup. But this is probably going to be the game of the week. So, we also have another game on Sunday, the first London game this Sunday. The Minnesota Vikings and New Orleans Saints go over to play London. There's going to be 5 international games played this year. 3 of them in London, 1 in Germany, and then another one in Mexico. But this is the first of 3 in London. But man, I didn't like what I saw from the Saints last week, but I really liked what I saw from the Vikings. I hope they can get that ground game going with Dalvin Cook going a little bit more and not be too Justin Jefferson dependent. But I do expect London to witness a great game. Both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Minnesota Vikings in this matchup. So let's move back to the States. Specifically, let's move back to the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Eagles. This is going to be a very tough matchup. This might be a high-scoring matchup. Now, you wouldn't have thought going into the season that the Jags would be fighters, but here we are. They're fighters, and Philly is the team to beat. Man, this is going to be a very tough one. I predict a high-scoring game, but both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Philadelphia Eagles to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. So let's move on to the other side of Pennsylvania with the Pittsburgh Steelers playing against the New York Jets. Woo! Now, as much of a high-scoring game as we anticipate for the Jags and Eagles, this game is probably going to be a very low-scoring game between the Jets and the Steelers. Man, I think it's going to come down to coaching, and I trust Mike Tomlin in that defense. Even though both offenses are pretty anemic, both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game. So let's move to down south to Atlanta where the Atlanta Falcons play the Cleveland Browns. Woo! Oh, these are scrappy teams. These are really scrappy teams. I like what I see from Cleveland. They're running the ball very well. But Atlanta, they're scoring points through the air and on the ground. Nick Chubb leads the league in rushing yards. But Cordell Patterson is number 3rd in that ranking. So Chris Palmer's going to be taking the Cleveland Browns, but I'm going to take the Atlanta Falcons in the upset. I think they're going to score a good number of points than a lot of people think. Now, this is without Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett was in a car accident, I believe, on Monday. And it looks to be that it was just a one-car accident, as reported by Ian Rappaport, and he's going to be out for a good couple of weeks for the Cleveland Browns. Thankfully, no one else was injured, and we wish Myles Garrett a very speedy recovery in this time. So, but with that being said, let's move on to Dallas, where the Dallas Cowboys take on the Washington Commanders. Oh, man, that Dallas defense against that arsenal of wide receivers in Washington, this is going to be a really tough matchup. But can Cooper Rush get it done for 3 weeks in a row? Chris Palmer and I think he does. We're going to be taking the Dallas Cowboys over the Washington Commanders this upcoming week. So let's move on to another NFC matchup, the Detroit Lions taking on the Seattle Seahawks in Detroit. Now this is going to be scrappy. This is going to be a real scrappy matchup. And I like it. I'm all about it. I'm going to take the Lions on this one. And Chris Palmer's also taking the Lions on this one. We just like what we see from Detroit. Even though DeAndre Swift, their running back, is hurt, I still think the Lions are going to find a way to win. And they're going to make it very hard for Seattle to win this game. So let's move over to the AFC, where the Houston Texans play host against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the Chargers are coming in very hurt this game. Justin Herbert is still hurt from that Thursday night game against the Chiefs. They have some cornerbacks hurt. Their 2 offensive linemen are gone and hurt. Joey Bosa is hurt. This is going to be a tough one for the Chargers, especially coming out of a loss out of Jacksonville. But, man, I think Houston's going to scrap. I think Houston's going to come away fighting this one. I like what I'm seeing from Houston. I'm going to take the Houston Texans to upset the Chargers. But Chris Palmer is going to take the Chargers because it's Justin Herbert and the Chargers. But, man, this is going to be a very tough one. This is going to be a very physical matchup. So let's stick to the AFC South, and let's talk about the Tennessee Titans playing against the Indianapolis Colts. Oh, man. Both these teams got their first win last week, and by different means. The Titans just ran it down the Raiders' throat, while the Colts just kept hanging on against the Chiefs. But, man, this is going to be a tough one. Does Mike Vrabel own the Colts? He might. He swept them last year. Chris Palmer's taking the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to take the Indianapolis Colts. I just think that something clicked last week where they're just, okay, it took them a little while, but I think this is where they are. And the Tennessee Titans, I don't know. Their defense is not looking that good. But we shall see. We shall see. So let's move to the NFC, where the Chicago Bears play against the New York Giants. Now, this is probably going to be a very low-scoring affair. Very hard-hitting game, physical, defensive game. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for whoever